Hey, Jeff, I can't hear you. You're muted.
That'd be a problem. Now I'm not. Okay. All right. Sorry, guys. The typical Zoom problems, and we're not immune to those. Okay, red dragon, red like the horse with the second seal, sent out to make war and bring death and destruction over the whole world. And also we have um, 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems. So, we have 2 sevens and a 10 in the description of the dragon, 7 for that completeness and the fullness of evil, and 10 for, kind of that completeness in the decimal system as well. And interesting that the crowns, that it's got crowns on his, on the heads, 7 heads, 7 diadems. So 7 crowns. And the crowns are not given by God. If you remember the crowns for the elders, those all come from God, elders before the throne. These crowns are not awarded or given by God. They're given by Satan to himself. So he's a dangerous pretender. And his tail sweeping a third of the stars reminds us of the 4th trumpet, where we saw that even the sky, the night sky, was participating in the catastrophes of those first 4 trumpets. And it does show the great power of the evil one. There's no diminishing the power that the evil one does have. And the focus of the dragons to destroy Jesus by eliminating his bloodline before his birth, or eliminating him after his birth. Remember Herod and the infants, where Herod had all the infants in the region of Bethlehem that were 2 years and under killed, put to death. So we've got Satan trying to eliminate Jesus by any means possible. And then ultimately, it's so ironic too that with the betrayal by Judas, Satan thinks, I gotcha now. And you're going to go to an untimely death. And it actually had Judas perform what needed to be performed. Without Good Friday, without death on the cross, we're still in our sins. We're not saved. So it is true irony there. Now, and then talk of the child. So the woman gives birth to the child. In Psalm 2 kind of brings out the rod of iron thing. So why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and with trembling, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. So I thought that Psalm 2 really kind of fit well with this description of the male child, which is Jesus. So next we have the death and resurrection of the Son in verse 5, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne, which is absolutely true. And so being caught up to God and his throne, that's the resurrection and ascension, and taking the throne with the Father that we saw in chapter 4, actually. So the woman is sheltered and protected by God after she brings the Messiah into the world. The 1260 days, as I mentioned, matches the duration of the two witnesses. And at the same amount of time, unbelievers trample the holy city that we saw in previous chapters as well. And it's not a coincidence that all three of those time frames represent the church age, and they're all three identical. So now we jump to a little mini digression in the middle of this chapter. So we have Michael and the dragon. And one of the things that appears to have changed was that with the death and resurrection and ascension of Jesus, the Son of God, that Satan no longer had access to the throne, to God as the accuser of the brethren, which was kind of his role. Previously he had direct access to the throne, but with Jesus there, he's the intermediary to the Father. And so Satan has no play in that. Satan has no access now to go direct. In Job chapter 1, just as an example of that, just to remind everybody. Now, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So, that's why Satan in the Old Testament is often called the accuser, and that was his kind of role. And then we saw it played out with Job, and then we saw kind of that victory over Satan in the book of Job.
Jeff?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I think I may have misunderstood, so I want to make sure I got it right. You said something like Satan had access to God, and I think you may have struggled here. So then you said it was Satan had direct access to God until what?
Until Christ took the throne. Until all
Okay.
of heaven and earth is given to him.
And
again, I'm reading between the lines, Em. It seems to be the demarcation point, the crux of the event. And it also seems, reading between the lines, that the reason Michael and the non-fallen angels had to fight against Satan and the fallen angels is that Satan refused to go. Satan refused not to have access and to be, and so that folds in to where this little sidebar on Michael and the great dragon. So, Em, did I answer? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I got it. I just kind of go in with the whole Jesus was always was and always will be. So what just the incarnation.
Yeah, he was, Jesus wasn't given all authority in heaven and earth in this pre-incarnation state. That seems clear. So I think that's the difference.
Thank you.
So we have Satan and the evil angels refusing to go. And just in Luke 10 was another, this is where Jesus mentioned this. He mentioned this after he sent out the disciples to the different villages, and they were throwing, casting out demons from people and healing people. When they came back and telling him, here's everything that we were doing, this is what Jesus said to him. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. Nothing shall hurt you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And we'll read a little bit later in Revelation about the binding of Satan, but I think the binding of Satan and throwing him down to earth, most of the commentators that we're looking at think that's when, because Jesus talked about binding the strong man in Mark 2. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying, he is possessed by Beelzebub. By the prince of demons, he cast out demons. And he called them to him and said to them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against himself, that house will not be able to stand. If Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but is coming to an end. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man. Then indeed he may plunder his house. So where we're going with this is that, so after the ascension, Michael and his angels throw Satan and his bad angels, they're cast down to earth. And Satan is bound. In one of the later chapters we get to, when it talks specifically about Satan and his demise, it mentions Satan's bound for 1,000 years. And that's what a lot of people call the millennium. And some people view that as happening after the second coming. But where we are is we're looking at this as happening. This is the church age, that Satan has been cast down and bound during the church age. And then he will become unbound right before the very end and cause all sorts of trouble. And that'll be the Great Tribulation. So that's kind of where we're going with this. Just giving everybody a heads up and forward look of what we're going to be saying. So Satan, so in some way, and there's no, that Satan's bound and restricted in his actions for some period of time. And I wrote here, probably the church age until the Great Tribulation. So Jesus and the church can plunder his domain and effectively spread the gospel message to the whole world. And another way of where Jesus was talking about the kingdom of heaven is close, is near, it's at hand. So the kingdom's gone from being near to here. So it's and I heard in verse 10, and I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And then we have another, and they, which would be brothers, have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows his time is short. And it's interesting, we'll see in the 2 later chapters, but woe to you, O earth and sea. And we have the beast coming up out of the earth and the beast coming up out of the sea as well. So now we're kind of done explaining a little bit of the backstory on Satan being cast out of heaven, bound during the church age. And so now we're back at verse 13. So the dragons, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. So we've got the persecution of believers during the whole church age, which makes, it's what we've seen. It makes absolute sense. So from my perspective, this is really this whole section fits together so well. And I have so many less questions about how we're fitting the pieces together with 12, 13, and 14. So hopefully I can express that to you guys to where you guys can end up thinking the same way. And, we mentioned let's see, times and half a times, that's 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. So again, it's the woman in the wilderness being pursued by Satan for 3.5 years. The same amount of time that we saw the two witnesses, the trampling of the outer court. So it all ties neatly together. And I think it holds it together. But so, Satan's even trying to hear it, water coming out. It looks like, Satan's even manipulating nature to try to attack the church, and creation is defending the church as well. So enraged Satan's changed tactics and he's going after individuals, those who believe and hold fast in faith to Jesus. And it's interesting that that even the people he's not going after, the ones that are his, are just, as we saw in previous chapters, just tormented, just live in torment and anguish. Okay. So it's interesting that the offspring, those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And that's the church. That we're to keep the commandments of God and we're to hold to the testimony of Jesus and all of this by faith.
Is it significant that he said he stood on the sand of the sea?
Yes, and that's the he's in between sea and in between land. See, he's one beast is coming up out. We'll see this in chapter 13. Okay. One beast is coming out of the sea, one beast comes out of the earth. And so the stance of the dragon, thank you for bringing that up. That's in verse 4. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth. So upfront confrontation. There's no dilly-dallying around. It is, it is a conflict. It is in the face of the church. No two ways about it. And just as a side note about just in the face of the church. And guys, this is not political. I'm just saying what I saw on MSNBC. So while the MSNBC, there's a lady reporter, and I'm doing her an injustice by not remembering her last name, but she had a panel of guests, and they were talking about Trump because it's after he won South Carolina, but it's not about. This is not political. This is about what she's saying. So, and we're talking about an attack on the church. So what she said was, there's a lot of fringe elements that circle around Trump. And one of those fringe elements are white supremacists. And a subset of that are Christian nationalists. Okay, Christian nationalists. I go, that's interesting. So I was waiting. Okay, what nasty things are these Christian nationalists doing? And I could not believe what she said. She says, she goes, these people, they believe that their rights come from God, that their rights do not come from Congress and the Supreme Court or the state. They come from God. She goes, I'm not talking about all Christians. I'm just talking about these Christians whoever they are. And I'm like, well, I think all Christians believe that. Well, and back to remember there's a phrase, we hold these rights to be self-evident. That our founders believe that these rights came from God, even though they might not have been Christian, they might have just been deist, but everybody believed that the rights came from God. But she was using this as a lever to say, can you believe these people want to follow rules that are not supplied? Now I'm fleshing this out now. She wasn't follow rules supplied by God and not by the state. And then she talked about, that's why these Christian nationalists have such twisted beliefs about abortion and these other types of things. And she said it all out loud, and her panel of guests were all, oh, yes, oh. And I'm like, well, and I waited to see what other egregious errors these Christian nationalists would have, but she moved on to another topic. That was the number one thing. That can you believe some people think that rights come from God instead of the state? State, unbelievable. That's absolute Marxism. Where there's no God but the state. I'm speechless over that. And
I agree, Jeff. Had to unmute for that.
well, so
Completely agree. Completely agree.
I would think that
Scary.
I would think most people would agree with that. Even non-Christians would agree with that. So at the gym this morning, I tested that theory with a non-believer, and oh my goodness, it did not go over like I thought. He was like, well, there are a lot of fringe elements out there, and they might not be Christians like you, but every religion has these extremists. I go, but I won't say his name, but I go, but hey, but extremists believing that our rights, inalienable rights, come from God, that's extremist. And he hemmed and hawed, but basically he was in agreement. I just don't know what to say about that. And so it's really, but like I said, it's not, my comment here is not political. My comment is just about in your face, something that not just 30 years ago you would have never heard, but 5 years ago you wouldn't have heard that. The pace of change that we're seeing now in our society is incredible. And where we've gone from being a pseudo-Christian nation, hard to really say we're really a Christian nation, but a pseudo-Christian nation, to now we're not. The powers that our kind of ruling elite, I guess you can, if you could call them that, they don't want people believing that rights and come from God. That everything's got to come from the state. And I was texting with Trip Jeffords earlier today, and he was lamenting pretty much the same thing. That what are we going to see with all the change that's happened just over the last 2 or 3 years? What are we going to see in the next 2 or 3 years? It just seems to me like we're that we're going to see persecution ramped up. That maybe it'll start with just like it is now, sidelining people that believe in that crazy stuff that our rights really do come from God, that there is a God who did create us, and that humanity has a special purpose and a special place in creation. And we're seeing that place attacked, and it is absolutely absolutely satanic, absolutely demonic. And it's only stoppable by God. If it'll either ramp itself up to where the second coming will be soon, or it'll or the God will swing the pendulum a little bit back to the other side to where we have more time. And I'm not sure what's what. And that's the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to think we know the timing of stuff. I think I skipped something, guys. I'm sorry. Hold on. Just a few other little things on the dragon in verse 14. The woman was given 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness. And note that this serpent here and not dragon. And the wings of the eagle. If you can remember that we had the eagles that had the 3 woes being said. So that again, we have the eagle being used and as a symbol here. And I wish I had better, with the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to, these are all symbols now. So I'm reluctant to take water like a river out of the mouth of the dragon, literally, just trying to think about what that could represent. And that's why I just settled on that the dragon was actually trying to use nature to attack the church. And God had creation also defending the church. So and so next week we're going to go, we'll do chapter 13, which is the beast from the sea, which pretty much everybody says is the Antichrist. And then we'll have the beast from the earth, which is the false prophet. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, so we'll have we talked about Satan being the deceiver and the counterfeiter. And so what we're seeing here is the setting up of the false trinity, with the dragon representing the Father, the Antichrist representing the Son, and the false prophet representing the Holy Spirit. And so we've got this false trinity put together here. And then as we proceed, we're in chapter 14, we'll end up with another kind of recap of the second coming. And then after that, we'll have the 7 bowls of wrath coming up. And that's the final judgment on unbelievers is what's that stated as. So we'll have the 7 bowls of judgment. And then the next 3 cycles after that are dealing with Babylon, which is we've got the prostitute or the harlot, however you want to say it. I'm reluctant to say the W word for some reason. So we'll have Babylon being dealt with, which I view as the culture, that worldly culture that we've got. And then in the next cycle, then we've got the Antichrist and the false prophet dealt with. And then the 7th cycle, we've got the dragon dealt with. And then we have the new heavens and the new earth. So that's kind of the process of where we've got going forward over the next February, next 2 months. So anyway, I know we're a couple minutes early, so any questions?
Not about this, but have you heard anything about Neil?
No, I have not.
You don't know? He was supposed to have had a back operation yesterday.
No, I have not gotten an update on that.
Okay. Okay.
Em, have you heard anything? Okay. So anyway, thanks for bringing that up, Scott. Appreciate that. All right, any other questions? If not,
Or Ron Cote,
He was in CCU.
because he was in ICU.
really?
Ron Cote sits in the back at the 10 o'clock service.
Oh.
Excuse me, Neil's having his surgery tomorrow.
Who is?
Neil,
Oh, it's tomorrow? Okay,
Tomorrow.
I was told one,
no, he's having his surgery tomorrow.
okay. Okay.
Well, who would like to close us out with prayer? Whoever does it is going to save Don another prayer.
I'll say it if y'all can hear me.
Sure.
We hear you fine.
Okay, all right. Thank you all for letting me join late to all this, but I appreciate it. Okay, here we go. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Dear Lord, thank you so much for Jeff for leading this Bible study, and Don and Barbara for hosting him, and also if they're leading also, thank you, Lord, for them stepping up and doing this and sharing their knowledge. And I know it takes a lot of research and work. Lord, thank you for the dedication and the wisdom and the
Oh, no.
It's froze.